I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
Before the ink had dried, the room was silent. Prince William presented his father with a historic removal letter and refused to back down in front of high-ranking courtiers, palace officials, and shocked onlookers. Charles the King paused. Incredulous, Camilla gazed at the page. The order that publicly deprived his wife of all significant royal responsibilities was then signed by the monarch. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates before we delve further into what this actually implies for the royal family. Charles was aware that everyone in the state dining room had anticipated a standard announcement. Senior household officials had assembled for what they thought would be a future responsibility announcement. William, however, showed up with a sealed folder. The royal duties removal instrument, which transferred Camilla's ceremonial appearances, charitable leadership, private advisory influence, and state hosting responsibilities to other working family members, was placed inside music. William put the folder in front of his father and spoke calmly, which made the situation much more difficult. He informed the king that the stability of the kingdom was in jeopardy and that private delays had eroded trust. Music. The prince didn't request another conversation. In order to make it apparent that the future king would no longer defend quiet just because it seemed easier, he demanded a public choice. Camilla remained still. She saw Charles hold the pen, pause, then turn to face her as if he were asking for permission to violate his duty or his wife. When the queen consort lowered his gaze, his confidence wavered. The room realized that the monarch had selected the crown over the woman standing next to him when the signature appeared beneath William's prepared declaration. Another shock was included in the closed folder. The meeting had never been a discussion because important royal experts had already approved the document before she arrived. It was the ultimate implementation of a decision that had been influenced by recorded council deliberations, written recommendations, and private sessions that she had never been permitted to contest. A second sealed page, music, with limits that appeared to extend beyond her official responsibilities and into the inner workings of her royal life, was hidden beneath the signed edict. William was about to close the folder when Camilla's voice interrupted him. She turned to face Charles and asked him in a low voice if he had anticipated this. The monarch remained silent. Music. His silence hurt her more than any charge since it showed that he had been the only one holding the secret of this confrontation, which had started long before that morning. The allegiances, anxieties, and personal scars that each of the three held must first be revealed in order to comprehend why Charles gave up the pen and William refused to back down. This was more than just a disagreement over ceremonial appearances or royal scheduling. It was a confrontation between a son determined to defend the throne he would inherit, a husband desperate to maintain the life he had chosen, music, and a queen who abruptly realized that years of power might be destroyed with a single signature. Every official title concealed a very personal worry, and these fears were now tearing the family apart. Through years of strain, family strife, and unrelenting public criticism, Charles had relied on Camilla. Music, she was not just his spouse. She had grown to be his closest friend, his personal advisor, and the person he trusted when royal duty felt more burdensome than he could acknowledge. That reliance was important since taking away her power did more than just alter palace schedules. It put the king's life's emotional equilibrium in jeopardy. Music, as heir, or the next person in line to take the throne, William had a new burden. Every postponed decision, he thought, would ultimately fall under his purview. The prince was concerned that the monarchy's credibility was being undermined by domestic unpredictability. He felt that his father's hesitancy had enabled the tension to become hazardous, and he could see how personal allegiance had started to interfere with unambiguous authority. William had recited his remark repeatedly while standing by himself in front of the assembly. One sentence that seemed overly harsh was eliminated each time. Music. He wanted Charles to realize how serious this situation was without thinking his son was attempting to make fun of him. However, the future monarch was also aware that gentler language had not worked in the past. He needed his father to take action this time. Camilla had come into the room thinking she was finally safe. She was persuaded that she had earned a permanent position at the heart of royal life after years of service, criticism, and well-managed appearances. The removal wounded so severely because of this. It didn't seem like an administrative adjustment to her. It was a public denial of what she thought she had persevered to accomplish. Williams had warned Charles in a sealed letter that was delivered straight to his private office 48 hours prior. He had two options based on the recorded message. Music. Either freely sign the order or witness the supporting documentation given to the entire Royal Council, the senior body that counsels the monarch on important state issues. After midnight, the king read the warning. Music touched the page's edge and declined to call his wife. Smaller signals had previously caught Camilla's attention. Over the past week, a number of devoted home assistants had been reassigned without cause. Although she was skeptical of the alterations, she accepted assurances that they were just temporary. She realized now that they had been intentional. She still thought she was in charge of the space, but the ground beneath her had been moving. Everything shifted at that ceremony, turning years of covert tension into a struggle that could no longer be kept behind royal walls. Every royal breakup has an unforgettable moment later on. Music. It wasn't a negative headline, a muttered insult in a hallway, or a leaked discussion for William. In one well-planned ceremony at Windsor Castle, Camilla made a choice in front of important visitors, music, that directly questioned his authority and compelled the future king to conclude that private warnings were insufficient. William had already taken on duties that had previously been practically solely his father's. The prince assumed more appearances, more private briefings, and more authority over the future course of the monarchy as Charles curtailed his public schedule. Because they influenced who represented the monarch and whose opinion carried weight, royal patronages, charitable causes, and public institutions backed by family members became particularly significant. Camilla would not let such influence to discreetly leave her home. Every change, in William's opinion, should adhere to a cooperative transition plan, a coordinated method intended to avoid conflicting directives. However, the Queen Consort persisted in issuing directives via her own office, leading to misunderstandings regarding public appearances, ceremonial precedence, and main cause control. In front of ambassadors, high-ranking courtesans, and charitable leaders, the Windsor Commonwealth event turned into a turning point. Only 3 days prior, Charles had legally delegated authority of that transition to William, so the announcement fell with harsh impact. William stood next to Catherine, maintaining a composed demeanor. He recognized this was more than a small miscommunication, and she could feel the shock underlying his quiet. In front of the same individuals who were supposed to follow his leadership, Camilla had contradicted him. Catherine sensed that something had changed inside the future king, but he remained silent until the guests had departed. All constraint ceased with the closed door. William requested that Camilla retract the announcement and utilize her home office to make the necessary corrections. She declined. Then she informed him that no matter how many responsibilities the prince had taken on, the current monarch still had ultimate power because being an heir did not yet make him sovereign. From a nearby room, Charles heard the last words. The king halted outside the threshold but decided not to enter, according to a written statement later made by a senior courtier. William was persuaded by his quiet that his father would keep postponing the dispute until someone else made a choice. That night, Catherine discovered the last piece of evidence. Days prior to the reception, invitations bearing Camilla's permission had already been issued to patronage agents, demonstrating that the announcement had been planned rather than made out of rage. William went back to his private office, took off his ceremonial sash, laid it over a chair, and told his secretary to start writing the document that would abolish royal obligations. Music. The next conflict would completely eliminate convention, leaving no ceremonial language, officials, titles, or music to shield them from their true beliefs about one another. The door shut. For the first time, William and Camilla were the only ones involved in the conflict. The aide remained outside. There was no king positioned in between them, no well-crafted statements, and no cameras. She went in with the intention of stopping the document before Charles saw it. Refusing to give up, he stood next to the desk. Years of repressed anger burst into comments that neither could ever take back in a matter of minutes. After discovering that a document endangering her official position had been examined by palace legal officers, Camilla had demanded the meeting. Before royal commands are accepted, those officers review them. Music. Ensuring that each directive can be followed without causing confusion within the household. William consented to talk about music, but he wouldn't go into her apartments. Rather, the prince made it obvious that this was about the crown and not a personal family dispute by choosing an impartial position close to the council room. On the tabletop between them, Camilla set out the Windsor patronage schedule. She maintained control over her voice, but it was clear that she was angry. She insisted on knowing why William was undermining her power without the king's consent. The queen consort accused him of turning a disagreement into an attack on her position and argued that the reception announcement had mirrored tasks she had already been carrying out. William did not retreat. He informed her that she had never had the authority to grow on her own. She was accused by the future king of constantly pressuring Charles to decide between his duty to the kingdom and his allegiance to his wife, music. He claimed that each contradictory directive had weakened the king and left others unsure of whose order was final. Camilla retaliated where she knew the hurt was most intense. William was informed by her that his campaign was about punishment rather than duty. Then she implied that he had never distinguished between the grief and rage around his mother and her current function. The prince's composure almost gave way, but he responded that current evidence was unaffected by personal experience. When William opened the draft, he saw 6 written directives that had been sent through her office after Charles had specifically suspended them. The documents revealed directives issued under royal power without final approval, changed patronage decisions, and music, misdirected invites. This was not a single emotional error. There was a pattern. The last reality struck more forcefully. William revealed that following the Windsor confrontation, Charles had secretly approved the drafting process before losing the guts to finish it. The heir had concluded that the signature could no longer be made in secret because of that retreat. William stared at Camilla as she tightened her grip on the schedule and pushed it in his direction, saying, "Music, you will not decide my place while your father still wears the crown." He answered. In theory, Charles had already made a decision. Whether he would sign as king or conceal himself as a husband was the only unanswered question. However, William's self-assurance came from more than just tenacity. A meticulously constructed network that had already altered the palace's power dynamics stood behind him. William carried more than just a document when he entered the altercation. He had the backing of leaders who seldom united unless the monarchy itself was in danger. Through music, private briefings, and signed memos, and talks conducted away from Camilla's home, their alliance had developed covertly. The king was nearly the last to accept it, and by the time Charles faced the public signing, the balance of power had already shifted. Before presenting the removal document to his father, William conferred with Princess and Catherine, senior constitutional advisors, and the Lord Chamberlain. The senior official who assists in overseeing the royal household and important ceremonial affairs is the Lord Chamberlain. Their concern was not Camilla's marriage to Charles. It was the growing reach of her office into decisions meant for the sovereign and the heir, creating rival commands at the heart of the monarchy. And met Charles without aids and spoke with the blunt honesty only his sister could risk. She told him that protecting someone from consequences was not the same as protecting them from cruelty. The king did not respond with anger. He looked wounded and asked whether his own family had already decided music. He was too weak to control his household. The evidence answered before and could. The Lord Chamberlain had prepared a chronological file showing disputed instructions, changed seating plans, redirected patronages, and delayed approvals linked to Camilla's office. Each entry appeared small alone, but together they formed a pattern of power, moving beyond agreed limits. The file mattered because conflicting orders did more than create embarrassment. They weakened confidence in who truly spoke for the crown. Catherine added the detail that ended any hope of dismissing the crisis as personal resentment. In a documented account given during a private palace briefing, music, she confirmed that she had withdrawn from 2 joint engagements after her office received opposing commands carrying both the king's and queen's authority. Music, she had stepped back to avoid a public clash, but her silence had allowed the deeper problem to remain hidden, and closed the evidence file and rested her hand over it. Music, she told Charles that William was acting because everyone else had waited too long. The prince had not created the fracture. She said he had simply refused to keep pretending it was harmless. Charles walked to a side table, poured water, and left the glass untouched. He asked whether the signing truly had to happen in public. and answered without hesitation. Secrecy had created the crisis, so secrecy could not repair it. The king finally agreed to attend the gathering, but he demanded one condition. A second unpublished page would preserve Camilla's title, residence, and marriage, while removing the authority that had caused the conflict. When the second page was finally revealed, the removal ceased to be symbolic and began reshaping Camilla's daily existence before she had even left the room. The first consequence arrived before Camilla had recovered from the signature. An official approached her household secretary, requested the Queen's state diary, and began crossing out engagements one by one. Within minutes, rooms she had commanded, ceremonies she had expected to lead, and charities that had prepared for her arrival belonged to someone else. The document was no longer ink on paper. It had entered her life with brutal speed. Camilla watched the transfer begin without being asked for consent. Her state hosting duties, ceremonial appearances, patronage oversight, and access to confidential planning meetings, music, were removed almost at once. Those meetings shaped future royal events and decided who would represent the crown, which meant her exclusion was not symbolic. It cut her away from the daily decisions that had given her influence, and accepted several state functions temporarily, while Catherine received selected national and charitable engagements. The changes mattered because both women could step into roles once associated with the queen consort without waiting for a long transition. Every reassignment proved music that the palace had prepared for this moment before Camilla knew the final order would be signed. The sharpest blow came quietly. Camilla watched her private secretary lift 3 red folders from her desk. Red folders contain official papers requiring senior royal attention, and she had handled them as part of her working position. Music, she asked where they were going. The answer came softly to the prince's office. For several seconds, she could not respond. Camilla found Charles in a private corridor before he could retreat behind another meeting. She demanded to know why the changes had begun before he had spoken to her alone. The queen consort wanted one private explanation, one sign that their marriage still carried weight after the public humiliation. Charles answered with exhaustion rather than anger. He told her that every delay had made the final decision harsher. The king insisted that waiting longer would only have deepened the conflict, but she, music, struck back with the truth that hurt most. He had not merely removed her duties. He had allowed their son and senior advisors to witness her defeat. The second page made the new reality impossible to deny. Camilla could no longer chair household meetings, issue independent instructions under the sovereign's name, or represent the crown without written approval. Music. Yet Charles's condition preserved her title and private residence, proving that he had tried to separate their marriage from her institutional power. Camilla returned to her sitting room alone, removed the insignia prepared for that evening's engagement, and placed it inside a drawer she did not close. Behind a closed door, husband and wife would finally speak without the crown between them. And one quiet admission would change the meaning of the entire removal. There was no council table between them that night. No William, no officials, and no document waiting for another signature. Charles entered carrying only the weight of what he had done. Camilla sat beside the untouched evening tray. Music, no longer demanding explanations. For the first time since the crisis began, both understood that the question was not whether the order could be reversed, music, but whether their marriage could survive the truth behind it. Charles had canceled his final meeting and dismissed the staff before entering. He wanted no advisor listening, no courtier recording each pause, and no royal office shaping what either of them said. The removal order was already active, music, and reversing it would mean reopening the entire dispute before the royal council. The senior body called together when major decisions affecting the crown must be formally considered. Charles finally admitted what Camilla had feared. After the Windsor reception, he had authorized the first draft of the removal document himself. The king had then delayed the signature again and again because he believed duty might destroy the personal life he had fought decades to preserve. Each delay protected their marriage for another day, but it also allowed the crisis to grow. Camilla listened without interrupting, then told him the public signature had hurt more than losing the duties. She could survive canceled engagements and closed meetings. What she could not forget was his silence, while others watched her authority disappear. At the moment she needed her husband to speak, the monarch had lowered his eyes. Charles answered that defending her publicly would have required him to deny evidence he had already accepted in documented briefings. Music. He could no longer ask William to inherit the damage created by his avoidance. The prince would one day carry the crown, and the king knew every unresolved command, divided office, and broken line of authority would eventually become his son's burden. The deeper truth changed everything. Charles revealed through their private recorded conversation that William had first demanded Camilla's complete withdrawal from royal life. The king had fought that proposal and secured the second page, preserving her title, residence, marriage, and limited private charitable work. What she had seen as punishment was also the last protection he could offer without breaking completely with his heir. Camilla removed her wedding ring and studied it in silence. The gesture frightened Charles more than anger would have. Then she placed it back on her hand. Her public authority was over, but she refused to let the crown decide the entire meaning of their marriage. By morning, the palace would announce the order, and one image outside Buckingham Palace would turn their private pain into a national verdict. As the official statement reached the public, the silence inside the palace was replaced by headlines, crowds, and a reaction no carefully prepared announcement could control. At precisely 9 o'clock, the palace statement appeared, music, and within seconds, the private crisis became a national spectacle. Broadcasters interrupted their schedules. Newsrooms replaced prepared front pages. Crowds began forming outside royal gates. Yet one image captured the country's attention more powerfully than any official wording. Charles signing at the table, William standing by him, and Camilla seeing the life she knew depart. The palace stated that Camilla had been removed of all important governmental obligations while keeping her title, marriage, residence, and permission to support a restricted number of personal charities. Music. Principal state tasks are the formal responsibilities carried out on behalf of the crown, including significant events, official hosting, and national engagements. Officials called the shift a necessary restructuring, but the public's signature made that explanation impossible to accept as ordinary. Outside Buckingham Palace, the reaction became quick. A crowd gathered beneath the balcony as commuters stopped by a neighboring newspaper kiosk. Across its greatest front page ran the words, "The heir's ultimatum, King signs, Queen removed." Some people raised their phones, others simply looked. The headline turned years of covert struggle to one cruel words. A national broadcaster launched its special coverage with an even stronger assessment. The presenter framed the event as a transfer of moral authority before any transfer of the crown. That phrase circulated within minutes because it captured what the public had witnessed. Charles still wore the crown. Music, but William had imposed the decision that changed the household. The country divided very instantly. Supporters, music, hailed the prince for safeguarding the institution and resolving a dangerous conflict over authority. Critics decried the public signing as a premeditated humiliation placed on the king's wife. Cruelty and victory became conflicting interpretations of the same event, and neither could completely obliterate the other. Catherine watched the coverage from Kensington Palace until pundits started making fun of the family's suffering. She shut off the screen and said nothing. The reorganization had the backing of the future queen. However, Camilla was clearly disturbed by the price of success throughout the festivities surrounding her demise. In a succinct taped statement, and acknowledged taking on temporary responsibilities but denied feeling victorious. She clarified that because there was a breakdown in trust within the home, services had been transferred. Her remarks demonstrated that the palace could no longer conceal the fracture and that the problem went beyond scheduling. After receiving the morning newspapers, Camilla folded the stack shut after reading just the first headline. She gave her secretary the order to cancel all outstanding requests for interviews. Her only remaining control was silence. Music. Camilla's official future had been resolved by the document, but the true cost of the victory to the monarchy could only be ascertained at the last exchange between father and son. The signatures were safe by the next evening. The palace machinery is operating under a new balance of power, and jobs have been redistributed. But there was no triumph on any of the faces. William had safeguarded the organization he would eventually run. Camilla had discovered that being close to the crown could never ensure long-term control over it, and Charles had given up a portion of the life he loved. The ruling was no longer up for private debate. Camilla's power over state ceremonies, household strategy, and autonomous directives issued in the name of the crown was permanently terminated by the royal duties removal instrument, which remained fully operative. The legal order that specified precisely which royal powers had been eliminated served as the tool. Music. It closed all avenues for her to regain the power she had previously wielded, but it did not terminate her marriage or title. While Catherine assumed responsibility for certain national and humanitarian commitments and took up a number of redistributed state obligations, William instituted a formal approval procedure that mandated that important directives from every royal household go via a single, transparent conduit. The future king was adamant that personal influence would never again erode the monarchy's chain of command, and this reform was crucial because conflicting instructions had caused the crisis. When everything was finalized, William had a private meeting with Charles. The prince acknowledged that pressuring his father to sign the document in public had hurt him and damaged their relationship, which might never fully heal. The monarch said that letting the situation worsen until a public act was required was what caused the deeper harm. What had occurred was not justified by Charles. He explained to his son that in certain cases, an heir had to challenge the sovereign, the current king who had ultimate constitutional authority. However, he cautioned William against confusing correctness with avoiding consequences. Power obtained via conflict always required a personal price, and a necessary victory might nevertheless leave wounds. At last, William clarified that he had never been motivated by retaliation. Silence would have weakened the crown before it reached him, which is why he had taken action. The future monarch was afraid of taking over an organization split by conflicting orders and personal allegiances. The anxiety in those statements was audible to Charles. Father and son realized for the first time that they had been attempting to defend the monarchy in quite different ways. Without facing any further public criticism, Camilla left the public eye. She supported a few private causes without the power of the palace while keeping her title, home, and marriage. Music. Although the queen consort no longer held formal authority, she agreed to the boundaries she had previously opposed. Charles put his signed copy in the confidential archive of the sovereign. William saw him shut the drawer, and neither man tried to open it again. The pen had deprived a queen of her position of authority, but its greatest impact was felt by the three individuals who realized that while love might be safeguarded inside the monarchy, duty must always come